Hi, everyone. I'm Dean McVey with South Anchorage Club. I'm the current district treasurer, have been for approximately 3 years, so I'm outgoing. I'll be done here at the end of June. George is coming on as our new district treasurer. I'm going to let him do most of the dirty work here, and I'll chime in from time to time. And George, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, I'm George Elgee. I've been with the Glacier Valley Rotary Club since 1984, and I spent the first 14 years of my career being the treasurer. I was made treasurer the day I walked into the club, and so I know what this can be. They didn't wait. They just said, new member, and he's a CPA. He is now the treasurer forever. I even did the job when I was president. So I know what this can be. So anyway, we'll jump into this. Welcome to you guys. To be treasurer. Actually it's kind of fun, but it's some work. So and we are the stewards of the club, and big fiduciary responsibility. So you got to keep everybody in line, your entire board and stuff. So. Get something in the middle of my screen, but the main thing, the first thing you actually do when you're coming into the club, starts right away. It's going to be develop an annual budget. And you need to get that probably going as soon as possible right now. If your club president's identified as directors or her directors, and get those, find out what's going on with your club. You can't put a budget together if you don't know what's going on. The next, obviously, there's money coming in from all kinds of places, managing the club. So you could have grant funds coming in, and we'll be talking about that. Obviously, club dues. Most clubs collect for lunch and every other thing you can think of from their club members. Most clubs have friendly fining and things like that they're paying for. Or you got new vests, and you got whatever the club has. Our main job is to maintain accurate accounting records. That's what they're asking us to do. And if you don't have that skill set, like you're not a professional in this field, it would be nice to find those people in your club and try to get them to help if you can. I mean, a lot of times we're very fortunate. Our club has like 5 CPAs and bookkeepers, and so we over the years we've been able to tag team that and have people, some people can do QuickBooks. They don't want to be sitting behind the treasurer's table during the day, so we farm those things out. You have financial statements. We'll talk about those. Taxes, and then a number of clubs have gaming, and there's particular rules about that, and we'll talk about that. Rotary Foundation contributions. You need to work with your foundation chairs to make sure you get those collected, and a lot of times you need to get that to Rotary Foundation as quickly as possible. A lot of people that have been in Rotary, like myself, for a long time, we go directly to my Rotary and make our contributions directly to RI that way. And then last, we'll talk about fraud, embezzlement prevention. We're the stewards of this money, so we need to be careful about what's going on, and your entire club needs to be nothing more embarrassing than have a fraud going on that you should have caught, maybe. First thing you need to do when you become treasurer is get the bank accounts switched over from the new signers, and it can be obviously the treasurer usually signs checks. It depends what your size of your club is as to how much independence you can have. Basically trying to have people do different jobs and stuff like that. But most clubs are small enough that the treasurer is going to be paying the bills, and we like to see two signers, but like I say, the banks don't recognize that. How often do you pay bills? You need to ask people, the last treasurer. Okay, so the person going out needs to say, how often do we pay bills? Is it twice a month, or monthly, or twice, every 2 weeks, or whatever? Try to find out how often you pay bills.
George, I'm going to jump in for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Up to bank accounts. Most everybody's online these days, and it's a good idea if someone can be checking your bank accounts on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be daily, but I would think you'd want to do it once a week. And for clubs that maybe have an administrator or a non-signer doing bookkeeping, if you can get the bank to give permission to them to be able to view the account, you generally don't want the signer to have activity over that account if it's not a member of the club. But if you've got a club administrator that can have rights to view that account, that helps maintain a situation where you can spot a fraud or a bad check from time to time, versus waiting for a monthly bank statement to come out.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dean. I mean, a long time ago when we used to have the checks come back, which basically no longer happens, we used to have the bank statements sent to another person in our club, and they would go through it just to look at the checks that were being written in the signatures. So that doesn't happen anymore, but to have somebody else in your club that can actually go in there and take a look, and somebody that has an analytical skill that actually would understand that a check was written that shouldn't have been written or something. So yeah, anyway, back to the bullet points here. You have fundraising things that go on there all the time. At least our club does, lots of them. And so not only do you need to keep track of those separately, but the chairs of those clubs want to know all about it too. And then if you're getting ready to prepare a budget, you need to know what's happening, what fundraiser is going on. And probably by the time you're treasurer, you kind of have an idea what it is, but it's real good to get a hold of the chairs of each of these committees and find out what's going on. The other thing is we use QuickBooks. Most people do. It's a very affordable program. And if your skill set is not on QuickBooks, hopefully in your club somebody has got that skill set. You can get it at Costco. You can get it anywhere and get it set up and running. But hopefully you're just taking over from the last person that had QuickBooks, and you can just continue forward with that. Now you don't have to have QuickBooks. If you're very small club, you could probably do it on Excel, but QuickBooks seems to be the preferred thing. And I think I actually put the club on that, and it's been almost 30 years since I put it on there. Where are the financial records kept? I guess basically if you're keeping them in the cloud, or if you've got them backed up on your computer, if you were the prior treasurer, then you need to get that centralized if you can. It certainly is helpful if your club has a place that those records are kept. Reports, we have reports that you got to work with secretary on this, but you also have RI, we have club to the board. I mean, the board needs to find budget to actual every month. They want to basically have a financial statement so they can see if they're over or under budget, and you can talk about that. District and RI, you're going to have, you have dues to be paid there. And then locally, you might have sales tax, but not usually. Sometimes that can happen. And then, and the one thing about this, like on our town, if you don't file, you have to file once a year to tell them about that you still exist in sales tax. If you forget that, they'll fine you $25, even if you are a nonprofit. Federal government, of course, we have 9090 that needs to be filed, and there's different ones of those, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Dean, anything else you want to talk about in that area that I'm kind of
just maybe back up on the financial records.
Okay.
Most people that are using computers know the value of a good backup, and I would like to emphasize that if you're using your own personal computer or whatever to maintain the accounting system, make sure you have good backups, and it's easy to have those kind of things in the cloud nowadays. What you don't want is to have your system go down and it be the only copy laying around. Now you've got big problems.
Yeah, good point. So I'm going to move on. Okay. Some of this is redundant, but you got to meet with the incoming. This is developing the budget. This is a pretty big deal, and we'll get into more a lot of detail on this one. But you need to meet with your incoming president and outgoing treasurer and review the income and expenses to start the preparation of the new budget. And it's not too early to do that. You need to adopt that budget basically the first meeting of your board, the new board. So basically, you're just to make it simpler, it's not a very complex process in a little operation like Rotary usually. You're looking at, you're viewing the current year budget and comparing it with what you actually received or spent as far as income and expenses go. And then look at the things that change significantly. I mean, if something is completely blew up, you need to find out why that particular area of operations ended up having, materially different than what your budget was. And then ask, is that going to be the same going forward? Or was this a one-time deal? Anyway, you need to find out almost every single line item, say, okay, is that going to be the same, different, and why? And then, and if you've spent that same money last year, you're probably going to spend it again this year. And then maybe you're going to spend a little bit more or less, depending on what. So, and then you need to meet with each committee that's got a fundraiser. Like we have a bunch of them. We have Bacon Fest and the Duck Derby and Pillars and all these things. And you need to talk to those people about what their budget's going to look like for this year. And those can be big. I mean, our operation is pretty good size down here. So again, communicate with the board members about the financial status of the club. So what you're going to do is you're going to, again, find out what they have going on in their, they're going to have a fundraising activity. They know kind of how much they're going to need to start this project, and then an idea of how much money is going to be coming in from that project. And that's, unless you have a brand new project going on this year, they probably have a pretty good history of what's happened in the past over the last few years. Determining the project dues, if you're going to raise your dues, you need to find out about that sooner than later. And then, you do have some internal operating expenses, not generally a lot of them, but most of the things that we would have would be related to our lunch meetings, where we have to either rent the room or we get it provided. But I think we've had all kinds of things over the years where we've changed locations and how we get lunch and cater it and have it provided. And so you need to find out about that. If you have fundraising proceeds or restricted donations, you need to keep track of those. And that would be if you received a donation that said, I want it spent on this particular thing you guys do, then those funds are just for that. And so if somebody provided that to you, either bequest or somebody gave you some money because they really like that particular thing you do, then you need to keep track of that money separately. And they're called restricted funds or endowment funds, but most of the time it's restricted. Gaming permits, this is, you can get caught by this one. This is very, very particular. So if you have operations at gaming like we do, we have the Duck Derby, we're selling it, very particular rules about that. And I can tell you right now, we got busted, probably 20 years ago now, but it was when Facebook was first out there. We had pictures of our club, and one of the pictures in our club showed a deck of cards on something, and we got popped for it. And because we were using cards, we went around the room and we said, okay, everybody it was a little fundraiser, and we bought $1 and everybody could go in and they could get a ticket, and they drew the ticket, and you could go pull a card out of the 52 deck. And if you got the Queen of Spades, you won. And if you didn't, it just moved on until you were down to 3 or 4 cards and everybody was buying. Well, you can't use cards at all. You can't use dice. You can't use anything like that. So we're now using beads. Beads are okay. We have 52 beads with 1 green one, and it works. So just be careful. They look, I was surprised that we got popped that way, but we were on probation for a while. We're now good boys and girls. And but our big one is the Duck Derby, and that's about $50,000. And they look at that very, very closely. Incredible rules. Like you're supposed to dump the ducks into moving water. We dump them into a lake, and we finally argued with them that the wind blows them around. If you can believe that. Won it. Anyway, just to give you an idea, they can be tricky. Okay, so preparing your budget. Excel, like Dean's got on here, is if you've got Excel, and you can dump QuickBooks out to Excel, and then use that as your draft. Otherwise, you have to. You just export your financial statements out, your P&L mainly, and use that to start your process. And we'll, in another slide here, we'll show you how that works. So you want to prepare a draft budget, and again, for the incoming board prior to July 1. So right now is a good time to start thinking about it. And then you need to obtain approval of the budget at the first board meeting. So that's a good deal to have. So you get it ready, you're ready to rock and roll, and then that budget is input into your QuickBooks. When you print your financial statements every month, you can have budget to actual, which is real nice. So first thing you need to do is get a prior year budget and look at that, current year actuals to see what the changes are. And then you get the over and under in the third column. And then you have your fourth column is going to be your proposed budget. So you can see what the original or last year's budget was, what the current year actual, and then over and under. And that gives you a place to start to try to find out what's going to happen this year and get your budget together. So this is a worksheet. Again, the first year we get the budget, the first column, and the things on the left are just, that's kind of a summarized view. Obviously, a lot of people have write down, they got the big staples and the small staples and the paper clips and stuff, but you don't need that much detail usually, but most people do. They just put the chart of accounts over on the left and start there and work their way to the right. So you've got your budget, first column, actual in the middle, so that was last year's budget, this year's actual, and then the third column, there's the over and under. Which expenses were or income was over or under what it was expected it to be. And then the proposed budget, this is where you go back on that third column and you ask people, is this going to be consistent this year? Is something else going to happen this year that we need to know about? And then, get that in there. And obviously your anticipated revenues should not exceed your expenses. That's the preferable method, unless you've got big reserves and you're doing it for a purpose. But we're supposed to try to live within our budgets. And that is, Dean, you got anything to add to that? I know I've been talking away.
No, just that I kind of like to think of overhead versus my fundraising. And so it's almost like you got two different budgets. So the overhead is going to be the collection of your dues and then the payment of your regular ongoing expenses. The fundraising part of it, which would include the gaming, would be those types of income versus the related expenses and the contributions that those funds are funding. And the main thing is you want to keep those two things very separate, the overhead part of it versus I'll call it the charitable part of it. We don't want to be spending charitable funds out of the overhead budget. In other words, if you're not collecting enough dues in your club to meet the nut, you can't go over and grab money out of the charitable to do that. So George referred to that earlier. Those are restricted funds, and the accounting has to be such that it recognizes that so that we're not dipping into a pot that we're not supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's developing your dues amount that's a good way to do it. I mean, if you think about what Dean just said, the first part of it is we are not out there asking the public for money to fund our operations in our club. So like if you want to send your president to RI convention, or you want to send people up to district conference, you better use that out of club funds. And so figure out a way to raise those internally and not, we're out there asking the public to give us money to go do nice things. And we probably don't want to be sending our people off to RI convention with that. So that's a good point. And then, like you said, if you got revenue projects that are doing it, your chairs really want to see what that is. And then you should have, that's what you do with the revenue. Then if you want to do global grants, or if you want to do district grants and subsidize them, or whatever it is you're going to give to charity, he's got a good point there. So
we have a question.
Yes.
We have Michelle Strickler. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Just hit your microphone at the bottom.
Oh.
We can see him, Michelle.
Can you hear me? Sorry, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what my question was. I typed it so long ago. I think it was, bless our hearts, how do we budget in COVID days? Because our fundraisers, do we have to assume some draconian 20% risk, or are we just learning as we go?
I think you're learning as you go, but I mean, obviously the newer fundraisers, the ones that are going to happen, like our duck derby may be canceled this year because it's in August, right? Or usually.
Right.
We don't know. I mean, if can we? I think those are, but it is a fundraiser. It's not an operating one. So if we don't do it, I mean, we're just not going to be able to give as much to charity. But that it's a good point. I mean, that's where you need to talk to your committee chairs. And then if you got some kind of a crystal ball, I mean, I don't know. You're right. That's what we call risk. And
Uncharted territory.
And we're all got that. I mean, it's just like we make money. Almost all clubs make a little bit, hopefully, not much. But if they charge enough for lunch, they might actually walk away with a little bit of money each time. But if you're not meeting anymore because you can't, then that probably means that budget is the treasure for the clubs this year. It's going to be challenging to come up with a budget that matched last year's because of, like you said, the revenues are the revenue projects may or may not take place, and then our meetings are not taking place right now. So we've got some and I expect district and RI are still going to want their dues. So,
I'm going to add also that, a budget's not set in stone. We might get 3 months into the fiscal year here and it becomes known that something big has changed. Well, there's nothing wrong with go back and revising the budget to reflect that change, because it doesn't do any good to stick with a budget that really doesn't have useful information in it. So if better information comes along, I don't think there's any problem with revising that budget. Of course, you'd want to get board approval to do it and use that new information going forward.
Yeah, all these things are going to be changing. I can't think of one aspect of any club. I mean, it's just like youth exchange is, if this thing doesn't get corrected, I would suspect youth exchange is going to have some big hits. I mean, it may or may not even happen, I would think. So we got issues there. I mean, like Dean said, as time goes on, we're going to have better information. And I think you plan for the best. And then if something new information comes along and says it ain't happening, then obviously we can go back and revise the budget. But it's, yeah. Good question, Michelle. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm going to move here. So basically, one of the things you want to do on, you're working closely with the club secretary. The club secretary is taking attendance every day. And then they're going to report on to RI and district about how many members we had, and the dues are based on that. So you're going to be watching pretty closely on that. But collecting the dues, your donation sponsors, money, and the money raised from these activities. If you get a foundation or a district grant, those monies have to be, there's a special report. There's all kinds of rules on that. District grants, not so much as global grants, but if you get a global grant, you got to have a separate account, all kinds of things. And then gaming activities, as I've said, gaming can get all over you. So be very stringent about how you keep track of your money for gaming, because they do actually come in and take a look, even at the Rotary Club level. We don't have a lot of this is gambling. It's that's why they're so strict about it. And so basically managing your club funds is very, very important. So district RI, and we'll talk about this, but district and RI dues are pretty much due the same time. You can, they're January and July are usually when you're making those payments, and it's based on June 30th and December 31st memberships. And interrupt me anytime, Dean, if I've got that all wrong, because
No, I think the next slide we'll dive into that a bit deeper.
Okay, good, good. Obviously, meeting expenses. And I used to write a check. That's one of the, a lot of times we're paying bills differently, but writing a check to the either the restaurant or the caterer at the end of the meetings, things like that. Meeting expenses. You may have other meeting expenses too, but those are usually it's to either the caterer or the room, or you're either doing that. They're usually based on plates and things like that. Everybody's a little different, but you can have that. Committee activity costs, again, that's part of your budget, and they're gonna bring those to you. You're gonna pay off the invoices. No forward funding to anybody. Make the Rotarian come out of pocket and then reimburse them if they've done something. That's usually the way we do it. That way you're not asking for an expense later on. Just try not to ever do that. Community service and grant expenditures, again, from those fundraising things, you're going to give money back to the community somehow, either in a project or directly to an agency or a group that you think is doing great stuff. Grant expenditures, if you get a district grant from our district, they're going to want to know what you spent it on and what the project is. Take lots of pictures and stuff like that. Administrative expenses, again, I keep thinking of club dues, but there's probably other, sometimes we need a new computer because the club one went, cattywampus or something, and things like that. Promotional expenses. We have like Rotary Days on the radio, where all of the clubs in town take time on the radio and stuff like that. Sometimes there's expenses associated with that, but actually the guy that owns the radio station here is a member of our club and was past president, so we get all that free now. So anyway, it's great. And then obviously miscellaneous office expenses, whatever those may be. You need to keep track of those. And then the disbursement of the gaming proceeds. I can't emphasize that too much. You absolutely need to get those proceeds out and document it. You got winners, and then you got what you're gonna, you got to use the proceeds correctly.
I might jump in here and add, in these days of debit cards, once in a while you'll run across a situation where somebody says, gee, wouldn't it be a good idea if we had a debit card for the club? Then we don't have to worry about check signing and that type of thing. And I would highly discourage that type of thing. It's all right for your personal life, but I don't think you want that in your Rotary life. There's very little control over something like that. The audit trail is lousy, and things can spin out of control real quick if you got folks using debit cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that. And credit cards, debit cards, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Most of your club members can afford to pay for it themselves and then ask for reimbursement. And if they don't ask, then they donate it, and that's fine. Yeah, don't go that route. I don't even like that in business. So.
Hey, we have another chat question.
Okay.
Andy, when we meet, we have a split the pot using raffle tickets. Do we need to keep track of each week's winner?
I'll jump in on that. Split the pot is gambling, and accordingly, if you're doing that, you're under the rules of Alaska gaming laws, and accordingly, you would have to keep track of that to properly report on your gaming reports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing too small with gaming.
That's a fact. There is nothing too small.
Yeah, and I think Dean, in one of our other slides, we talk about that. But there's nothing too small. So if you're doing that, I mean, it's not a difficult thing to do. And maybe we get into it later. But you have 2 members in your club, and it's an open book test. It's so obvious, like, it's pretty easy to pass. In fact, you can't not pass the test because you wouldn't get your license, but it just puts them on notice, and then you don't get, like we did, embarrassed about it. It's more of an embarrassment thing because obviously the amount of money, the club is earning but that is kind of one of our little fundraisers, right? Those happen, and they're kind of fun, and everybody, gets a little giggle out of it, and they put $1 in for a ticket, and then at the end, or like we do, ours builds up because, we have that split the pot, but then we also have the marbles. But it's all kept you know, at the end of the year, we do a little report that shows how much we did and what happened to it. So if you're going to do it, just do it. Play by the rules and try to do it. It's not, by opening the door, it's not a big deal. It's just, there's rules in Alaska. That's all. So club dues, and you guys can do this pretty much any way you want, but you have to pay them, you know, basically 2 times a year. So you can collect them annually at the beginning of the year or whatever, or semi-annually or quarterly or monthly. And that's determined by your club. I believe we're doing it quarterly now. I tell you the truth, I'm not sure. And you know, that is one of the things, I don't know if we mentioned that in this slide, but our members, a lot of them give a credit card to our treasurer, and that credit card is used to pay all these things, all these tickets you might buy to events. You know, if you want to come in and say, gee, I don't have any money with me, but I still want to play our club lottery, you can put it on your account, and then once a quarter, or yeah, I think it's once a quarter, they just hit your credit card with it. Now, that being said, you've got to be real careful when you have people's credit card information. And that is absolutely got to have the secure way of doing that. And if you need help with that, we have people down here in our club that know how to do it. And I'd be happy to share their names with them. Anyway, it's very, very important that when you get information like that, that it is kept basically very confidential and very secure. So I'll just, that was kind of a side thing, but anyway, the dues amount each year for the board of directors are provided by your club bylaws. Okay, so every year the board gets together and says, and it's based on your budget, and this is where we come in. You know, we say, well, how much money do we need? And we go back, oh, okay, we may need to raise our dues to cover this. The other one is district dues. There's $65 per member, and it's paid in 2 installments over the year, $32.50 in December and $32.50 at the end of, or it's January and July, but they're based on the members that we have in the club on June 30th and December 31st, and those reports are sent in by the secretary. And so that's the main thing. And then as Dean puts on here, the district, sends a notice to 3 people in the club, the president, secretary, and the treasurer, to make sure that the district's going to get paid for their dues, so that we don't want it to go one place and go, oh, we didn't know about that. So we want the president, treasurer, and secretary to know that the dues are due and how much it is.
So it's real important for for the incoming officers to have their correct information into Club Runner. we need accurate addresses and that type of thing, so that you get notified promptly. And boy, we sure appreciate it when you can turn those checks around and get your dues paid up, so we don't have to be chasing those. I'm still chasing 2 or 3 clubs right now for last January, so don't be in that group. Yeah, we send people down to talk to you. No, we can't afford it because we don't have your money. Anyway, yeah, the balance is due in full. And if you made a mistake on it, this is where you need to work with your secretary. If you've got people that are no longer in your club, and then they should be removed, then remove them. Because if you send us in and say, this is how many you've got, that's what you're going to be billed for. And we do not change it after the fact. Okay. And neither does RI. So be very careful. You need to get thin. If your roster has people in there that haven't been coming and it's June, make sure that you remove those. And, besides that, there's always these things that the president-elects, they always, they want to they don't want to lose a member. So don't remove them after the fact. You got to get them before the fact. So, and they get a new member, they get credit for it. So real important to work with your secretary on that. That's kind of their purview, is to maintain that roster and make sure it's accurate. Yep. Really important. So international dues almost mimics what we do. It's 2 installments, July and January. And again, it's calculated on the members that were there on
the reports that go to RI on, December and June, and they're $34.50, so it went up 50 cents a member this year. Or I mean, actually, it's $1, right? $34.50 per half year. Yeah, went up $1.
Right.
Yeah. And again, it's same thing, split over it, and so the invoice is prorated for new members, just like we do in district, or at least in our club, we prorate the dues and stuff. So,
And just to emphasize, the dues that we collect district-wide, we're dealing with you folks directly. International dues at the district level, we have nothing to do with that. So you folks will be dealing directly with international on that. I get questions from time to time. Well, what's up with our international dues? Not our job here. That's between you and RI.
Right. Yeah, we don't have information on. We know what we get for it, I guess, in some cases. The magazine, things like that. But yeah. So we're on a fiscal year basis. Fiscal year starts July 1, ends June 30th. So that's the main thing. Treasurers, I remember, and this is kind of an interesting one. It doesn't sound that second bullet. Attend the weekly club meetings. Okay, in a small club, depending on where you're sitting, and gosh, over the years we've met in the Glacier Valley can't seem to find a place to camp for too long before it has to move again for whatever reason. And sometimes if you're the club president, or the club treasurer and the secretary usually sit together, you can be, if you're not in a good place, sometimes you're not part of the meeting, and then you're sitting next to the same person every time. And so sometimes the club treasurer will be in name only, or at least maybe they're doing the QuickBooks and all that, but somebody else is actually collecting, coming in the door. Okay. But somebody has to be there every single meeting to make that happen. So if you're going on vacation, obviously somebody's taking over for you. But a good way to do it sometimes, especially if you were somebody like me who was doing it for 14 years, you go, I want to sit out there and meet other Rotarians and talk to them for the brief time I get to do it, instead of sitting in one spot. And but anyway, that's something to think about. Okay, so keep track of collections and payments. This is coming in the door where we have different ways of doing it. Our club actually does it, like I said, quarterly, and this is for lunch. We basically, you get billed for lunch whether you show up or not. And now obviously it came about because we said, well, about 30% of the people don't show up, so we could do a reduced rate. Whatever, how you do that, you can, and that moves it along very quickly. If you don't have people having to sit there and pay for lunch, people come into the room and they, it doesn't matter because you paid for lunch already. So the secretary is keeping track of your attendance, but beyond that, the secretary or the treasurer is usually selling you a raffle ticket, or the odd person that doesn't sign up for the automatic payment of their lunch and stuff. Again, having a sheet next to it, either again, QuickBooks is the accounting program that was preferred thing. You can use Excel if you want, but it's got to be something that's, Excel is just a version of the old kilometer pads that only really old CPAs know about, I guess.
You're probably going to need some kind of manual sheet during the meeting, though, to keep track of this stuff. Most people aren't going to be sitting there working on the QuickBooks during a meeting. So
no. You got a sheet, and especially if you have somebody that's not, you're just having them collect the stuff. Yeah, you're not going to have QuickBooks anywhere near it. That stuff goes to QuickBooks is later on. This is collecting. You're keeping track of everything that you're collecting, and there's you've got one section that's you count the cash for the split the pot, if that's what you've got. You've got people that paid by check, and the tougher one is they pay by cash because preferred checks, or and then again, credit cards. Nowadays you can have those systems where you can slide the credit card through and things like that. We got away from that because it was just internet connections, all kinds of issues on that one. So, and it just slows everything down. That was what we did. But Again, tracking undesignated administrative expenses versus designated gaming, youth, exchange grants. So that was, like Dean was saying, we've got the administrating the club, the things that just happen in every single, whether we're there or not, it's going to happen. And then the other one is the designated ones where we collect money for projects that we're working on, or we have money that we're using for, that we were given to, for a particular project. Youth exchange is one that seems to be, that's got monthly stipends to parents and things like that. So, and then grant expenditures. So, if you get checks and stuff, copying the checks before you make the deposit is highly recommended. And it's just, I mean, that's what most businesses do. They keep checks, the deposit of the checks. And so if there's ever a question about it, you can see where it came from, what it was. Make sure you've got to make a deposit timely. And it just is a story. When I first came in Rotary, we have the boat show down here, and it was Saturday and Sunday, and the boat show closed on Sunday. And I had a bag of cash, $12,000, and it was sitting in my apartment because I couldn't make a deposit on Sunday. At least I didn't know how to do that. And so all night I worried that somebody's going to break into my apartment and steal this cash, and I was going to be like looking at, whatever. So don't get in that position. Make sure that deposit gets in the same day. If once you get it counted up and you got it sorted out, take it over to the bank and get a deposit. Again, reconcile your bank statement every month. That's it. That it's an easy, if you got QuickBooks, it's a pretty simple method. Thing pops up and you're clearing your checks and you're clearing your deposits, and if something showed up that it shouldn't have been, then you need to find out why. Make sure, but always reconcile your bank statement every single month. Do not let that go by. Now, some clubs have two signatures. Tell you the truth, I haven't done our secretary job treasurer job for a long time, so I'm not really sure. That is, this bullet point says the bank isn't bound by it, but it's a nice thing to do. What we started doing was no check could be written unless the bill that was being paid was approved beforehand. And again, having a third party look at that bank account is another way to prevent any kind of a fraud that might happen. So that's, but two checks is typical. A lot of people do that, but again, the bank isn't going to be held responsible for having one signature. Charitable and operating funds must be tracked separately to ensure that proceeds and fundraisers are used. Again, we've gone over this a couple of times, but you can't hit it too often. It's nice to have it completely separate. So when you got a fundraising charitable operation part of it, keep those funds separate. Make sure you're doing that, and then the operating funds for the club. So, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but a lot of and obviously we're not going to get it, but Rotary International has been looked at is how much money do you spend on administration? It should be less than 10%, but we want ours to be zero. We want all of our operating funds to come from just our dues. We don't want anything used for charitable, but that's a perfect world. But that'd be the preferred thing, that we spend all of our operating money from our own club members, and then everything else gets to go to charity 100%. So, club members' dues statements, get those out quickly. Our club is, like I said, we do it quarterly. They're like clockwork. So, but again, we have a paid bookkeeper. Well, not a paid bookkeeper. We have a bookkeeper as one of our members that does it. So she's really got her act together, and that's very helpful when you got one of those, even though she's not treasurer. So the treasurer, so we can have a non-CPA or accountant be the treasurer, and then we have we were blessed with having people like that to basically just do that, as long as they didn't have to be there every day and this and that and the other. They were happy doing that part for the thing. Gaming reports, you need to put those together. And again, we're lucky because we have somebody that's been doing that for a long time. But look at the prior year gaming reports. It shouldn't be that difficult to look it over and you know, mimic what happened there, review them, make sure they're you know, they're correct. Because again, this is one agency that looks real closely at what you're doing. So
I'll just add that a key to a lot of this stuff is just to be timely. Do not get behind. Once you get behind, can be a pretty deep hole to dig out of. So in terms of, you know, making bank deposits, keeping the records timely, filing reports, make sure it's all timely, make sure you have a good checklist of your deadlines. Probably not a good thing to just have those in your head. I'd have them written down somewhere so that you can tick them off every time that a deadline comes up.
Yeah, put them on your Outlook, you know, things like that. Give yourself a couple weeks before these things are due to out there as a reminder, things like that. Okay, so one of your main jobs is preparing the financial statements for the board, and this is where, that's why being late with the stuff like that, you need, I mean, this stuff is, you know, Dean and I are accountants, so it kind of comes in our blood, but you got to keep up with it. Things you've learned, you like he said, you cannot get behind on this. But you're going to have a balance sheet. The balance sheet is, in most clubs, it's cash, and then you might have some unpaid bills that that haven't got paid yet, things like that. And then this is where you would have your cash is just, it may not be you know, eligible for being spent on anything. Let's put it that way. So the fund balance, that's usually what you have: cash, you have liabilities, and then you have fund balance. And that fund balance represents, you know, if you don't have a bunch of other assets. Most clubs don't have a lot of physical assets that they're keeping track of. Restricted funds, those are monies that came in that we can only spend on one thing or one type of thing. The other one, and you need, you know, a nice thing is to narrate things to your board. A lot of people, when they look at numbers on sheets, they go blind and stupid. You need to, if you've got something you want to point it out to them. If you say, hey, this is how much cash we got, they don't have to look for it. And they go, oh, good, you know, and put a big bullet next to it or something like that. Anything that's unusual in your financial statement you want the board to be aware of, make sure you point it out to them. And you don't get too far in the weeds, but just say, you know, show them, like if budget and you got income and expense, so you got budget to actual. If there's something that's gone astray, make sure you notify that everybody on the board is aware of it, and do it that way.
So you guys, you have about 9 minutes left.
Okay. Well, I think this might be really close to the last slide. No, anyway, we'll, again, evaluate the actual budget. We want to do that. Present the financial reports monthly at the board meeting. It goes without saying. You're going to be one of the people on the list every single time at the board meeting. And so next thing is we have a 990. Most of the clubs have got a big 990 to fill out because they're over 200K. If you're lucky, you got a 990Z, and then those things are due, you know, November 15th for a year, 630 year in, and then you can actually get another 6 months on that. So it's almost a year you can have, but don't do that. I mean, there's no reason, if you've been keeping your monthly financial statements, you should be able to get that thing out, you know, within a month to 2 months at the most. And if you've got, like we do, we do hundreds of them for firms in June. I mean, little operations like that. We basically do them for free. So, but we do make them do some of the work, and we don't do it everything. And then if you're really small, under 50K, you get a 990 which is a postcard, and it's really virtually nothing. But if you've got a CPA in your club or accountant type, ask them to help if you can. I mean, no reason for you to learn all this law. They've already got it, that's what they want to do. Okay, something is blocking my view here, but I get stuff all over my screen. I have pictures and sitting in waiting room in there. let's see. Oh, okay. I get what this slide is. If we're making paying anybody over $600, we've got a 1099 issue. We need to do that. And the same thing with the W2G. That's the winners of your raffle prizes and all that stuff. And that's again if it's over $600. If they're and I don't, Dean, can you explain that 300 times the amount of the wager? What's the calculus on that? I was trying to back.
If you had a $5 wager, you take 300 times that, that'd be $1,500.
Okay.
So I think you'd have to meet both of those parameters in order for you to have to be able to be required to issue the W2G.
Okay.
It's a technical thing. Most people aren't going to have to worry about it, I don't think.
No, they're not. And that's where we're lucky because we have people that are all over this thing. We take this very seriously. So I would have to, they know all the rules on that. And again, the State of Alaska Biennial Report, that's a license thing because we're a corporation and you can go online. Those are all online. You can just go to the Biennial Report and do it that way.
And that can get past you because it's an every other year thing. So you kind of need that in a tickler file somewhere to.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do they do if you don't file it? They DQ you or something like that?
Yeah, you could lose your corporation status. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll send you a notice. I've done that before. So yeah, I didn't even know about that until I went, really?
They're not so good about sending notices either. I wouldn't rely on them.
No, but you can go on and look and see what.
Yeah, you definitely want to go online and look. You can always do that.
Yeah, that's a good thing to do. So, gaming again, Alaska, nonprofits to obtain a gaming license annually, and so license applications are now online. Need a primary and secondary, so you need 2 people in your club. It's an open book test, and reporting is done through the division. And there's a little. If we send these slides out, there is, you can go online and find out where the division of is and do those questions. If you have a gaming permit, you got to fill out the report, send it to Alaska, either quarterly or annually. And you got 45 days after the quarter to get it in. So March 15th is the one at the end of the year. And then you get, again, just go online. If you've got this, you should be familiar with everything that knows to go on there. But just be aware if you guys are doing that, if your clubs are doing this, get yourself up to speed on that. And this is Dean. I'll let you take this one over. I like this. You're telling him putting the fear of God in him. Go ahead.
Well, I think mainly the fear of God comes from doing these little things that we do in our clubs. Just know that it is gaming and it has to be reported if you're going to be within the parameters of the Alaska law. So, basically we got consideration, we got a chance, and we got a prize. You got those 3 things, you've got gaming going on.
Right. That's right. So, okay. So your duty, again, this was one foundation share. Foundation, like in our club, we collect $100 from each member to be on the foundation. We're sustaining members. And so if you're collecting that, get together with Foundation Share, make sure you get that money remitted to the Rotary Foundation, at least monthly. I mean, it's nice if you're getting money, get it out there, send it to RI right now. So try to do
it's a lot easier if you can get your members to go to the site directly, have them work with RI directly, and then it bypasses you.
If you've got My Rotary, then you can do that. Yeah. So good idea. Audits, again, people think of audits as detecting fraud. They're not. That's not what they're for. In fact, that's exactly what they say they don't do. So, fraud is, again, it can happen. You got to have motive, opportunity, and anybody can rationalize in what they're doing. Internal controls are the best defense. So monthly reconciliations. If you got a lot of cash, if you're doing something that has a lot of cash, have 2 people, count it together and make sure, and count it twice and initial it and make sure that everything's there. So there's no, worry about it. And if you're going to write a check, have some paper trail, an invoice, and hopefully that invoice has been initialed by the people that agree that thing's to be paid. And so that's the third-party authorization before issuing a check. So special events, reconcile the cash, attendance, compare attendance to what they should have got, things like that. If there was 30 people and it was $15 each, multiply it out. That should be what you have. If not, try to figure out why somebody got in for free. It happens. And again, scrutinize the budget to actual, to the income statement, figure out why anything might have happened. There's a RI has got a webinars for treasurers basics. You can go there and get those. I've gone through them myself just to see what they're telling you, and there's some good information on there. A lot of what we've done today is mimics that, but at least you know that you're getting there. But anyway, that's a good source to go through, and that is it.
Hey, we have one last question. How many hours per month do you estimate a club treasurer spends doing this job?
Probably not more than 100. No, well, part of it is the club meeting itself. Okay, so I don't know if you want to count that or not, but that one's the one. And then it just depends what your skill set is but I'd say, most of the time it's going to be that day of your club meeting, and then you're going to have, I don't know, what do you think, Dean? 20 hours a month, maybe?
Oh, I doubt for a club treasurer. Well, it depends. If you've got an administrator, it's going to be a lot less than if you're doing all the work yourself. So there's not a single, if you're doing all the work yourself, it could be 10 hours a month, especially you got to prepare for a board meeting and present the financial, that type of thing.
Yeah. There's going to be a daily, right after the lunch meeting is not going to be, you just, putting that deposit together and all that, that might be an hour, of your time. Just, it shouldn't be that much, but that I just give you an hour, and that way you're doing it right. Everything's fine. You input the deposit into your checkbook and QuickBooks and things like that. And then, once a month, you're going to reconcile again. If everything's copacetic, you're going to blow through that reconciliation in 15 minutes. But if it's not, then it's going to take you longer. So that's the whole thing about keeping up. You don't want to do 4 months of reconciliations and then try to figure out what's missing and why, so, and that's why making deposits daily, you don't want to lose the deposit. You put it in your desk drawer and forget about it. And then when you're reconciling, go, what the heck? Why didn't this go to the bank? And it happens. It happens, not just to us. It happens to half my clients for, when we're doing year-end stuff for them. So anyway, that's, any other questions, Rosie?
No, but everybody's thanking you, and